Hi there, this is Mr. Evans. This video looks at external growth. So in my previous video I looked at organic growth and the advantages and disadvantages of that. In this video I will look at external growth. So we defined organic growth in the last video as expanding through increasing sales through expanding the scope of an organisation's internal operations. In other words, the business is growing through its own internal methods of growth. External growth, on the other hand, we defined as when an organisation increases their sales through integrating with other businesses. So there are different methods of doing this: mergers, takeovers and strategic alliances. There's some examples on the screen there. I went through this in a bit more detail in the previous video, so if you want some more information on that, that video is on organic growth. But let's have a look at the advantages and disadvantages of external growth. So external growth, we're taking over another business. We're in some way merging with another business. We're running our business and there's another business and we're in some way coming together with them, be it through a merger, a takeover, a strategic alliance. So how does that benefit us? Well, particularly with a merger or a takeover, we should be able to gain sales and market share very quickly. We're effectively buying that organisation's customers. When we buy that organisation, we're buying their sales. It enables us to quickly gain those consumers, assuming that they'll stick with the company under its new ownership. We can gain synergies, which is where the combined efforts of the two businesses are greater than those businesses were able to make on their own. So for example, we may be able to integrate two marketing departments. We've got two marketing departments in the two businesses. These two businesses come together. Well, we can conduct an audit of the most effective employees across both organisations. We get rid of those employees who aren't necessarily adding value or whose roles have been duplicated. And we get the best of both marketing departments at a cheaper overall cost. So we gain synergies. We're also likely to benefit from economies of scale, where I'll have a video on economies of scale in a bit more detail in a minute. But as we grow in size, we become more powerful as an organisation and we can cut our average costs. So I've mentioned about cost savings to be made by combining functional areas. We can gain expertise and know-how. Another organisation might be a real expert in one part of the production process, or they may have knowledge of a particular group of consumers. So this joint venture here between Chery, the Chinese car manufacturer, and Jaguar Land Rover has enabled Jaguar Land Rover to share Chery's experience of the Chinese market. They know the Chinese market really well. They know Chinese consumers. Well, coming together with Jaguar Land Rover has enabled Chery to improve the quality of the products that they're producing. They're really high quality products, and these organisations are benefiting as a result. Okay, they've gained each other's expertise and know-how. We're also able to gain potentially new technologies. Maybe a business that we take over or merge with is using better technology or a different process to what we are, and that will enable us to produce our goods more efficiently. Maybe that other company has intellectual property, copyright or patents that we want to get our hands on, and that's why we're taking it over. This is often used in kind of Silicon Valley, high tech, or in the pharmaceutical industry. A small business has a patent on a particular product or process and a bigger company wants it, so they take over that organisation simply to gain their intellectual property. It also could reduce the level of competition. We might want to reduce the level of competition that we're facing, and therefore external growth is a good way of doing that. However, this probably isn't a perfect analogy, but you can imagine it's very difficult sometimes to organise the integration of two contrasting organisations. So just imagine if your family in some weird world merged with another family. Everyone's family has got their own kind of unique routines and cultures. What time you eat dinner, television programs you watch, morning routines, all of those things. And if you were trying to integrate new people into your household, that might not work terribly well. They'd have different ways of doing things. Well, it's exactly the same with two companies. Companies have got different cultures, different ways of doing things, and when you merge two companies, they've got different cultures, different systems, different ways of doing things. Sometimes it works, but sometimes the two cultures collide, and it can be very difficult to get the companies working efficiently together. There can be an impact on motivation. Potentially, one of the motivations for external growth can be to gain synergies, to cut costs across the two organisations, and there's going to be maybe job losses in one of the organisations. Certainly work will have to be reorganised. There's new ways of doing things which people don't like. They don't particularly like change. At the very best, there's certainly going to be uncertainty about what happens, which again can be a destabilising influence on people and affect their motivation. We talked about the risk of the unknown for employees, but also, and this relates to the next point, you're buying another organisation's liabilities. You're never really too sure it's a bit like buying a new car. When you buy a new car, you don't really know much about that car. You hope that the engine's in good condition and you can check the brakes, etc. before you buy it, but there's still a risk of buying a new car. Well, when you buy a new business or another business, who knows what's been going on in that business? Thinking like of the Volkswagen scandal, where they were fixing the emissions tests. Now, if another company had bought Volkswagen and then it had been discovered what Volkswagen were doing, that new company would have been responsible for Volkswagen's misdemeanors. You become responsible for that company. If that company's been doing illicit things, dodgy accounting practices, etc., you're going to be held responsible for that. External growth can create competition concerns. I've mentioned how monopolies are illegal in many countries, and particularly in the UK. Any organisation that has a market share of higher than 25%, that's going to be looked at by the Competition Commission. And the merger may not be allowed to go ahead. There's the potential ethical risk taking over a new company, particularly maybe one in an emerging market or in a market where there are lower ethical standards. Are employees being fairly treated there, and will you have to improve the conditions of the workforce to make sure that there's no negative publicity? Finally, the costs of integration can be extremely high. Many businesses will have their own unique IT system. The systems work in a particular way. I mean, just imagine if one company is using all Apple software and another company is using all Microsoft software. It happens all the time, and you've got to try and integrate those two companies, get those two systems working together. That's going to be extremely expensive, time consuming, and could reduce the potential effectiveness of that merger. So when's external growth going to be most effective? Well, first of all, if a business has a strong management team who's able to integrate the cultures of two organisations, perhaps they've had experience of doing it before, that would be appropriate. When there are significant economies of scale and scope that are relatively easily achievable, that would be a strong incentive to conduct a merger or a takeover. If you're entering into a new market where one company doesn't have expertise, that gaining the expertise of another company would be extremely useful, particularly one that's already got distribution networks, contacts there, and is able to distribute a product. Very, very useful. If integration planning can be carried out before the merger, let's identify the different systems. Let's identify the potential problems that could come as a result of this merger before we carry it out, and then we can put in a plan to make sure that the transition is as smooth as possible. Finally, if the acquisition can be funded through retained profit, that would be very, very useful for a business, because it reduces its liabilities either to new shareholders or taking out loan capital to fund the external growth. So I hope that helps clarify the difference between external and organic growth and the advantages and disadvantages of each.